had just seconds to spare before their homes and neighborhoods were consumed by the deadly fires in California. A plume of smoke rose from the pocket fire near Geyserville, Kalof, on Thursday. Credit Derek Watkins. The New York Times. Santa Rosa, Kalof. Blaring car horns warned of the rushing wildfires in Northern California last week. So did exploding propane tanks and police megaphones. The smell of smoke was a sign of what loomed on the horizon. Frantic banging on the door by neighbors was an indication that the fire was dangerously close. Some of those who survived what is considered the deadliest outbreak of fire that the state has ever seen fled the flames with just seconds to spare. Behind them, in rearview mirrors or over shoulders, they saw their homes, possessions, entire neighborhoods consumed by the inferno. They are left now with memories, intense ones, unforgettable ones, of relaxing quietly on a Sunday night one moment and running for their lives the next. What they cannot forget is the fire, its quickness and heat, its smell and destructive nature. These are some of the stories of those who saw the fire and tried to outrace it. Was watching a movie with my 19-year-old granddaughter and I smelled smoke, and I looked out the window to see flames approaching, recalled Maureen Grinnell, 77, who lives in the hills north of Napa with her husband, Sheldon, 89. I went outside to try to wet things down with the hose, but it was clear it was futile, and we just had to get out of there. At that point, she said, it was a rush for safety. From when I first realized what was happening until we left, it was no more than 7 to 10 minutes, Ms. Grinnell said, but by the time I started to back the car out of the garage, the house was already on fire. We always thought the alert system would give us time, but there was no notice, no warning. We took almost nothing with us. It was me, my husband, who uses a walker, our granddaughter, and her poodle. We started going down the hill, but it looked like we couldn't go through, so we turned around and went the other way. But we didn't go far before the road was blocked, and firefighters told us we had to turn back the first way we went, so we did. I wasn't sure we could get through. I drove down the road through smoke with flames on both sides. Brad Weinper, 64, a resident of a Santa Rosa subdivision where hundreds of houses burned, said neighbors were awakened by neighbors, barking dogs, police officers and exploding propane tanks. We heard constant explosions. The winds were so strong. Trash cans were blowing over, he said. The police came by with a megaphone. They said, evacuate now, evacuate now. Upside down cars in the Coffee Park neighborhood in Santa Rosa, Kalof, on Wednesday. Credit Josh Han of New York Times. A car horn woke up Tom Caserta of Santa Rosa. It was a neighbor across the way. I think his daughter showed up and was blasting the horn saying, hurry up, Dad, hurry up, Mr. Caserta said. Then a deputy came down and started yelling, leave, leave, so we got maybe 10 minutes. We could see it coming over the hill. The smell of smoke woke Doug Hugill, also of Santa Rosa. We drove over to see what was up. We saw the flames coming over the hills, Mr. Hugill said. We headed back home and we got the push alert just as we got home, he said. Within 5 minutes we had pretty serious embers flying over our house. We had to leave. The house behind us was already on fire. We had barely enough time to get out. At a shelter on the Sonoma County Fairgrounds, Candace Hayes walked with her cane, her service dog, Copper, and a friend. Ms. Hayes, 61, who is blind, was awakened at 3:30 a.m. Monday by someone banging on my door in Santa Rosa. The neighbor told her, get out, there's a fire on the ridge. She left with neighbors, and returned because they thought it was safe. They were ordered to evacuate a few hours later. Her situation is made more difficult by her unfamiliar surroundings. If I have to go to the bathroom, she said, I have to wake someone up for assistance. But her home survived and she said, been lucky to be here. As she walked her dog, she said she was grateful for the friend whose shoulder she placed a hand on. The experience, she said, is shocking and terrifying. A burned-out structure in Glen Ellen, Kalof, on Wednesday. Credit Jim Wilson. New York Times. Sarah and John Shepard fled their home in Redwood Valley, Kalof, early Monday, piling some possessions into 2 cars, along with their 2 children and 2 dogs. They lived in a remote house in a wooded area. But the flames closed in so quickly that they could not make it down their mile-long driveway. They abandoned the cars and fled on foot, scattershot, unsure where to go. Mindy Ramos, Ms. Shepard's sister, said a neighbor, Paul Hansen, found Ms. Shepard hours later in the driveway. Ms. Shepard, 40, was badly burned, but lucid enough to ask for water. Her daughter Cressa, 17, who Mr. Hansen found nearby, was also severely injured. Her son, Kai, a shy 14-year-old who was just beginning to open up and like baseball, wrestling and playing the saxophone, was dead. Mr. Hansen found some water for the women and called 911. Paul said it appeared they had just dropped where the fire washed over them, Ms. Ramos said. Mr. Shepard, 44, was separated from his wife and children, but family members found him at a hospital with severe burns. On Friday, all three were still hospitalized and unable to speak, Ms. Ramos said. It was unclear whether they knew that Kai was gone. We had to run for our lives, said Pamela Taylor, 66, who lost her trailer and everything in it at a Santa Rosa mobile home park. A gigantic fireball jumped across the freeway, she said, from the barn to the trees around the trailer park. I saw 2 trailers and 5 cars engulfed in flames in a matter of minutes. She and her guest then pounded on the door of a friend's trailer to wake her. Everyone who lives there is old and needs help, Ms. Taylor said. I still don't know that everyone got out alive. Items that were collected from the rubble were set out on steps in the Coffey Park neighborhood of Santa Rosa, Calof, on Wednesday. Credit Josh Hahn of New York Times. The smoke was so intense that Kylie Garcia, a 19-year-old artist and student in a Santa Rosa subdivision, and her father, Raleigh Garcia, placed wet washcloths over their noses and mouths. My dad went outside to scope out the scene, she said. A burning leaf hit him in the face. They gathered clothes and fled the house, leaving behind boats, cars, motorcycles, artwork and a pet snake. She and her father then drove the neighborhood looking to help others. It only took an hour for the whole neighborhood to burn, she said. I remember looking up at the sky. There was black smoke everywhere. The sky was straight yellow. Days later, Ms. Garcia sat on a metal chair at a shelter. I still think I can pick up food at my house, but I don't have a house, she said. We're going to have to be starting over from the ground up. Outside a shelter in Santa Rosa, Bill Nickel, 89, clutched a canvas bag that held a change of clothes. A former correctional officer, Mr. Nickel had initially refused to leave his apartment in Santa Rosa, where he had lived for 20 years. He said he had asthma and did not want to go outside. So he ignored, he said, an automated call advising him to be prepared to evacuate, brushed off the volunteer who was banging on my door, and the widows who normally brought him casseroles but this time begged him to flee. Finally, a police officer told him to leave, so he did. Now he was outside the shelter waiting for a ride home, even though, he said, we're not supposed to be going back. The winds and the explosions from propane tanks were unsettling, said Debbie Bratberg, a schoolteacher who lived with her husband, Bob, a retired lawyer, in Santa Rosa. At first, the fire was on the other side of the freeway, so Ms. Bratberg was not overly concerned, even after a friend messaged that she was evacuating. Later, she learned the fire had jumped the freeway, so she and her husband fled with their mature cats, Pumpkin and Teppo, nothing more. Before leaving, they ran to their neighbors to warn them, awakening an elderly couple. As the Bratbergs drove away, we saw burning embers falling, she said. On Facebook, Ms. Bratberg posted a message that read, I'm homeless. I need everything. A friend of a friend offered them a place to stay for 3 weeks. It's a start, she said. A brick wall was all that remained of the home in the Coffey Park section of Santa Rosa on Friday. Credit Jim Wilson. New York Times. Tom Caserta, 69, credited goats and luck for his family's survival and the fact that their house north of Santa Rosa escaped the flames even as houses around them burned to the ground. His 3 pet goats had chewed every bit of grass to the ground, and the flames, Mr. Caserta said, stopped where the goats had done their work. I'm going to give them a special treat, said Mr. Caserta as he patrolled for smoldering logs and stumps. I saw that glow up there, and when I got up in the morning I didn't have to have them tell me what was going on, said Daniel Del Santi, 92, who refused to evacuate his home near Napa and watched the flames come within half a mile of his house. Did he consider evacuating? Not for a minute. I go down with the ship, he said. Reporting was contributed by Adam Nagorny from Los Angeles, Stacy Soley and Carol Pogash from Santa Rosa, Calof, and J.C. Fortin and Richard Perez Pina from New York.